thought we could start out. You could just tell me, because I don't even think I know. How did you get connected with the Moho?
Well, so I did this thing at Pauline McGibbon Center with Frank.
Oh, you did? Oh.
But before that.
And one day I was looking and I see this ad in the Toronto Star for Flashback Follies. Showplace. But this was when Kitty Meredith was doing it.
Oh, it was before Frank was taking a break.
Because it was the summer, right?
And then I happened to I was at, I think, the Equity office, and I was waiting, you know, how you would go and like hang out there to get an audition. So yes. I think I was waiting, and I think Leslie Toy was auditioning too. Like, we were sitting together, and we were talking, blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh, you should call Frank or call up the Showplace. So it was kind of all swirling around at the same time. Of course, I called and Frank wasn't there. Nobody, you know, because I called in the summer. And in the interim, in the fall, somehow, I auditioned for Pauline McGibbon. And
it's like a New Faces thing.
Yeah, New Faces. And Leslie Arden was in that show. And then Frank was directing.
Oh.
So from that, Frank was like, why don't you come and you know, we probably have a spot in this 40 show for you.
And that's how I remember the first day of you guys, because we both lived in the West End. We all lived in the West End.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we went to, and we saw the 20.
Because Frank said come and see
what
you think. Like the format. We're closing like the 20 show. It was like Deadsville. Like nobody was there.
Yeah.
But we did see the 20 show. You called me or something and said, oh, they need a follow spot operator. I took that over while I kept my day job.
Yeah.
For a little while, just to make sure everything was kosher. And that's how I got involved in it.
I'm trying to remember who we had for a stage manager before you.
Right.
It was a gentleman.
They had to have two people because the stage manager worked the lights from the booth.
Uh-huh.
And then did the DJing after the show. And somebody had to be to the front to operate the follow spot.
That's right. Frank had this thing where you could follow, you ran the lights till you learned the show. So he would have backup actors who also waited.
Yeah.
But, you know, there was innovation that happened.
Great innovation in Canadian theater.
Because basically he had lights, he had the board.
He moved it out.
Taken out of the, you know, the
by the time we went
I don't know what room you call that, the booth.
Yeah.
He took that out and put it in the front so you could run both the spot and
I could sit there, run the spot.
Yeah.
And then there was no more DJing after that either, right?
Right.
You didn't have to run into people's crotches.
Oh my God!
As you
because it was a Dutch door. You remember that? It was a Dutch door that went into the
to the dressing room.
But the top part didn't open. Of
course not.
So you'd have to.
Of course not.
You'd have to bend
to get in.
I don't know how many times I walked into various naked crotches.
Yes,
going in and out of it.
And that's the perk of the job, right? That was the upside of the job.
I always say that dressing room. You know, you turn sideways, you got lucky whether you wanted to or not. Like,
I believe too, you could access the stage from that.
But you had to go under.
You had to go under. Yeah.
You had to access the stage
yes.
too?
Yeah. You had to go under because I remember.
Because that's why Katie couldn't go. She always had to. She couldn't come on the stage from the dressing room.
No.
She had to walk out and come up that way. Because she couldn't duck. She couldn't duck under that double door that didn't work. That nobody had a key for. I mean, like, hello? Nobody had a key for. No, they couldn't open it up. Like, God forbid. Like, it was
I remember using that door during the only book show I did was Gypsy, and
it opened at that point. They had opened it up.
The other crazy thing when you think of it, once they switched to book shows and they moved the light board to the front, and there was no more, you know, because we used to be open till last call in the phone, right?
Because that was a whole night for them.
Oh, it went on bloody forever.
It's like a dance after the show. We waited on them.
La Bamba, and you know, we'd be playing 40s music and other music, and they would. But then once the book show, after the show, you'd come out and give one more round if people wanted, and that was it.
Oh, after the book show. In the book show. Yeah.
So there was no DJing. Yeah. There was nothing. I don't understand why after that was established, they didn't knock down that one Dutch store and expand the dressing room area because it connected onto the dressing room, which was so tiny.
Yeah.
How many people were in there? Eight people?
10, 12 sometimes. I mean,
I feel like Frank and Bob and Katie had hotel rooms.
No.
No?
Bob
did.
But when we went to the 40s, there was only Bob wasn't there.
Frank had a room.
But he'd still do his quick because a lot of times he would change into that zoot suit.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
He wouldn't go up to the.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Bob really was only in the
turn of the century
90s because I remember tap dancing with him. Yeah, he
choreographed
the 20s.
He didn't do the 20s?
And he and Kimberly both choreographed the 40s. And then I don't know if he ever came back. He was at Shaw after that.
Yeah, I don't think he came back. I mean, I don't remember seeing him much. But yeah, there was always that you run the spot. Oh, the other thing was you
had to fit the costume.
You had to fit the costume.
If you were replacing somebody.
Yes. Because I remember I was in another contract that only overlapped a week when you started rehearsals for Gypsy, and I really wanted to do it, but it overlapped a week and it wasn't going to work because Barb was Electra. Yeah. So Frank said, then I guess they needed to bump, I don't know where Pam was going, but they needed to bump Barb up to be Louise. And so I went on this crazy diet where I put I think it was vitamin B in my stomach and didn't eat anything but 500. And I got into that costume. Oh my God. And then after that, I left for another reason. And when I came back, you had moved up to be Mama Rose. So I got to be Mazeppa and Miss Cratchit. Yeah.
Right.
So I got to do it twice. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, and that ran for quite a while, that show.
Yeah, that did.
Because there were some other innovations that Frank was trying out. You have to remember that what happened was they closed that 40 show, right? And we were basically done, right?
Yeah.
It was bye-bye.
They were going to a new concept,
jazz, right?
That's right, yes.
But then at one point they didn't have enough waiting staff, right, for New Year's. So they wanted us to come back, right, for New Year's. And we were like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Screw you.
Yeah.
You want it? You let us go. But there was all this negotiation about what they were going to pay us and what they weren't. And
when they first did Cats.
No, that was the 40 show.
Was that
they liked it better than Cats.
Yeah. But it might have been, you're right. It might have been one of the book shows too.
Because Cats opened in the early 80s, right?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Marlene Smith produced.
Right.
I remember having this conversation. They were like, I didn't understand it. And like, what were those cats? I mean, because, don't forget, first of all, you have all these really, pretty fun performers on stage. They're right close to you. You kind of, it's not an intellectual exercise. You understand pretty much everything that's going on. You're involved,
but also in the fall,
Katie Murtaugh and Frank.
But in the fall show, there was tons of audience participation.
Yes.
I mean, it was a full night. And when I came across those old cards and menus and stuff, I mean, there was a meal, there was dancing, there was entertainment. It was like so cheap. It's like, my God.
And it went on like they came at 6.
Yes.
We were serving like hors d'oeuvres and singing solos.
Yeah.
And then we sang the opening. What was it? Not one of those.
Everyone loves ice cream.
No, that wasn't the old. Oh yeah, was it?
Everyone loves ice cream.
Because that was the dessert for the meal.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And that's meant we were to get ready for the show. And then they see a show and then they get to dance and we serve them drinks.
And celebrate New Year's Eve.
That one New Year's Eve when it was the 40s show when John Rankin came up. The four of us were singing da 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 Tuxedo Junction.
Yeah.
And it was it's the worst time to be a waiter or a performer New Year's Eve because the whole audience was so smashed. And you could see the mirrors.
Yeah.
I could see this stuff going on behind me. And I guess this drunk guy was trying to get at us and trying to grab us. So little John Rankin decided he was going to save our dignity.
It was the Foresters.
It was the Foresters
sitting at the Queen's box.
Oh, the Queen's box.
That's what we called that.
Yes.
That eventually became the no smoking section.
Oh, no.
But prior to that, it was just the Queen's box, it was called.
And they had taken, like, they had ripped off all the decorations and were wearing them as
garland.
boas.
That's right.
Yeah, they were ripping stuff down. I mean, and John was like, John had enough, right? He was like, enough.
Well, he was
and
in
here
a
we are trying to sing 4-part harmony with a fist fight going on.
And you guys were singing, the girls, and he was having a fight on stage behind you with this guy.
Because the best thing about that was that because of it was an old disco, right?
Yeah.
So as we're singing, there was a big pillar with a mirror in it, right?
In front of you.
So we're singing and we can see in the mirror John going by.
Yes.
Like and like that. Like one point he's got his shirt, like he's okay. Like we're thinking, what the hell is he doing? The next thing he flies by, his shirt's
shirt was ripped. Yeah.
And then he goes flying by again. Yeah, but Ma gave him such shit, right?
Yeah.
Rule of thumb, the customer's always right. Don't fight with your customer. But he was like, but they were such pigs,
Yeah.
They were,
but
and they were calling out like
somebody needed to take that guy
charge.
off the stage.
Oh yeah.
Because at that point it feels threatening.
It does, yeah.
I feel like, oh my God. And John was like in the right, like, get the hell off our stage. I was like, you shouldn't be here. But that was the best. I mean, we kept singing along. The other thing too, with this particular group, the Foresters, they were, some companies, right? They paid everything, right? Yeah. So it was, this was one of the groups they paid.
It was a host bar.
They were
open bar, everything.
Yes. Ordering the last call. They didn't order one drink.
That's
they ordered
right.
4 drinks.
This was just maybe a year or two before they started doing spot checks on the road.
On the airport
they
strip.
didn't do them
on the airport strip. Yeah,
at the early 80s. But about a year or two after that, because many times we would go home from the Moho and we'd get pulled over because they were doing spot check. But they were not a widespread thing.
Yeah.
And after that, people never really. Well, they didn't have the opportunity to drink as much either. If you just did one last call after the show.
Yeah.
So Karen, how did you audition? How did you hook up with Frank and how did
you it's kind of funny. I had just gotten, where the Bond Place Hotel is, right? Downtown.
Yeah.
Well, I was working there and the manager had been an actor. He's still a really good friend of mine, Robert. He used to find a job for me after I would not have because I never, so I did everything, switchboard back in the day, cleaning toilets, front desk, waiters. And so he would just find something for me. He was really kind. So I had just come off of doing Anna Green Gables in Sudbury, and I came back. Now, do you remember Frank's friend Joanne? But she was an agent. Well, she was working part-time at the Bond Place. And I just happened to have a lunch break with her at one point. And I was telling her about Anna Green Gables and how much fun it was. And, it was Peter Muse last time playing Matthew. It was really a great experience. And she goes, one of my best friends is casting a show right now. I should call him. And so she calls, Frank, you got to see somebody. And she's really pushing for me. And she just met me. And he goes, I don't want to see any more people. I'm doing callbacks. I'm just getting it down to who I want. I don't want to see. No, you got to see her. You got to see her. And I'm thinking, yikes. And I could hear him saying, argue. I go, it's okay. I'm going, it's okay. I'm not pushy. She goes, no, let her in on the callback. So gave me a call. She hung up. I said, why did you push for me? Well, you said you were an actor. Don't make a liar out of yourself and a fool out of me.
Which show was that? Which one?
This was the very original cast. So I was at the callbacks, the Follies, the flashback, the 90s.
The gay 90s, right?
Gay 90s. I got to be Sophie Tucker. So I showed up at the audition. I was still very green at auditioning. And so I really loved the song Can't Help Loving That Man. So and I'd already done a show with Doug. I put the music in front of Doug and I'm,
Oh,
And I could see Frank, I was waking up dogs in Philadelphia with his notes. And so anyway, Doug knew me because he'd done Limelight shows. And he goes, Karen, why don't you try it in a few keys lower? Why don't you do it like it's a sexy song? Instead of belting it out. And then Frank asked me to hump the chair while I was doing it.
Yeah.
And so I had a blast. And then afterwards, he said that there was a spot they needed a fill to tap dance with Bob Ainsley. Well, I just about fainted because I was such in awe of him. So I said, well, I'm a pretty good tap dancer. I'll do it. So Bob wasn't there. Frank's giving the tap audition to me. Yeah. But I corrected him because he kept doing all the tap turns wrong. He'd say shuffle when it was something. I go, no, that's a flap heel drop. And so I thought, I'm never going to get this job. I corrected it because I've always been a tapper since I was 5. Right. So it's in my head. And so anyway, but I did get to do both. So it was great. But yeah, I didn't think I'd get it after I corrected him.
Doug Balfour was the accompanist in the first shows?
Yeah, he was the original. Yeah, he was our original musical director.
And then Brian Rudolph.
Yeah.
But he couldn't do Broadway. And very shortly after, that's when Garth came in. Yeah. Garth Lambert.
Garth was great. Yeah,
Garth was really good.
Yeah, he was terrific.
And
Garth did all the rest of the shows, right? All the rest of the
and every once in a while.
Maybe Garth didn't come in right away. Stephen Woodgets came in first.
Oh, Woodgets, of course.
Yes, because he and Barbara Wielden. Yes,
that's right.
Stephen Woodgets, and then he and Barbara Wielden left both around the summer to do something else, other gigs.
That's right.
Maybe some stock or something. And then that's when Garth Lambert came back.
That's right. I forgot about Woodgets because he also fell in love with Alan.
Yes.
True.
Everybody would fall in love with Alan, including Pam Kinsman.
Yeah.
Brian, that's where he got the name PA. Poor Alan. Everyone's in love with him. So what do you feel like I know what my answer to this is, but what do you feel like you got out of this experience that you probably wouldn't have got at any other theater company at that age?
I tell everybody, like all the young people I work with, because a lot of folks, like, a lot of folks that would come in, this would be their first, when I was hiring, this would be their first gig or, maybe their second gig out of school. Yeah. I'd be like, I would say, I had a similar experience where basically, like, one of my first really professional gigs, those are the friends you're going to have forever. And because it was kind of in repertoire, it was sort of a repertoire company. Yeah. People came in, came out. Frank really had, he was a shit director, but he knew how to cast.
He did know how to cast.
But the thing is, it wasn't just casting for character. It was casting for character. It was for casting for people who fit in well together. For
good
the most
work ethics,
good work, that were really kind of salt of the earth kind of people. Yes. That's kind of what his gift was. Like, you could really sort of see, and he mentored people too. Like, he would, give them like all kinds of insights. And I mean, that's just the beginning. So now, how many years later, 40 years later, we're still talking, right? So this is what I tell people, like this, the work, when you get to work with people year in and year out, you're first of all, not only is it a great bonding experience, you're going to have those friends for life. You build chops that you don't get in any kind of other experience, because you get to do the same thing every night and then think about, okay, well, and for months on end, like, how am I going to make this different? And the other luxury, for me anyway, was I was working at my craft at night, and I made enough money most of the time to be able to take classes during the day.
Exactly.
So I took voice class. I mean, I took voice with Cleone. That was the thing. My knees were killing me, and like I was taking dance, so I was doing a lot of dance class. So I was able to, continue to skill build while I was working at that. One of the other things too was, when I went to theater school, the audience was dark. Like, I didn't know who my audience was.
Right.
I was I was feet, yards, whatever. The audience was so far away. Here, the audience was right on top of you. That's initially what terrified me most. It was like, I can't get away with anything.
Yes.
I have to be, and I have to connect with them. I have to be present. I have to be
natural.
Yeah, all that stuff, like really kind of, and warm and open. So all those things that like Frank really excelled at, in terms of just being with people.
Well, that's showmanship.
Yeah, it was really.
Yeah, he really has that, and
he had that in spades, right? So that was something I
loved him.
I didn't have.
Adored Frank,
right?
Yeah,
and then the other thing too is like, so one was so the whole idea of how do you be like in cabaret style, like there's kind of a style, and then when we switched to book shows, then it was a whole, then it was a little bit, it was different because now now you have to get into character, right? Now and it was, you're in some cases you had 5 characters or something.
Yes,
like that, right? And you were really close to the audience. So in order to pull it off, you had to believe it because you didn't have the makeup, you didn't have all the lights, you didn't have the sound effects. I mean,
so true.
You're coming off waiting on tables.
Well, waiting on tables, you're young, so that's like that. That kind of was just an extra thing. But yes, but you have to kind of switch. Yeah,
and I think that kind of focus had an added energy. Like you have that kind of focus when you're creating a character, but it had an added so much more energy that had to be there to be believable. Right. Yeah.
Well, Gerry always said if she had not done the moho, she done some things she could have done. Diamond Tooth Curdy.
Oh yeah, that would have been the perfect.
Or Klondike Kate. She did both of them.
Or Klondike Kate. I mean, I stole everything from Frank and from Katie. Every line, every gesture, every move. These guys were masters. And then you pull that stuff out at the right time, it's like it's gold.
Because the funny thing is that everything that I did at the Moho, I got to do in New York was my first job. So when I got called in for those things, like the first one was, I got called in for Mazeppa for the Gypsy Tour where I met our Dawn and Miss Cratchit. I'd already done those. And then I forget what I did in the 20s show, but I got involved with some dinner theater in Connecticut, and something I did in a 20s show and a song I did kind of prepped me for doing the Baby Schnooks act and then one of her songs. And then finally I got to do Sophie Tucker again in a book show. It was amazing. It was all about these, and it was all, I don't think, same thing. I don't think I would have had that confidence, especially in New York to go down there and, but yeah, I know the thing that I really, I'd already been working for a bit. I'd done the Limelight and quite a bit of summer stock and children's theater. But I never felt part of a community until the Moho. And the funny thing is I can still remember wanting to hang out with all of you outside of our shows. If there was a party, Brian and I were talking about this party that Frank took us all to so that we could meet other theater people. And we all sat in the hallway and renamed each other. But you know what? I really felt so much from Bob and Frank. I felt seen.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'd felt that. I was always oh, well, she's tall and she looks older. She can be a cheap yenta. You know what I mean? But I felt like Frank and Bob could give me stuff to go with my skills. I just felt seen. And I felt seen by everybody in the cast. I just fell in love with that whole cast.
Yeah.
But it really made you feel better going around auditioning. Not only because you were already working, but just the confidence and skills you got from that.
Well, but the thing was too, I think it's because, there was this ensemble feeling about it, but beyond that, it was this experience of waiting on tables. It's and even as a stage manager, initially in the 40 show and all those shows, I could only bus tables.
Right.
But then when we moved to book shows, I ended up waiting on tables too. You're doing this, which is very intense and setting up. And then after there'd be the dancing and the drink, there'd be the show. And, that I think was what made the incredible bonding experience.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Because there was something so intense about that work environment.
Yeah. You had to, yeah.
Yeah.
So everything had to come out well, this is the salad song. Better eat up.
And also a lot of people there, and I guess this is Frank. I don't know if it's Frank or Frank and Circumstance or they had it. We all had a similar sort of humor.
Yes.
You know,
and I hadn't come across
what
that.
you needed to work there.
Not,
I know people who came to see shows, friends that weren't performing, and it was appalling to them because they couldn't even imagine how you would do this. But I thought it was such great fun.
Oh, me too. Because I mean, and I still will never forget the picture of you scraping this filthy, like all this food, and you're just standing there, and then you went, I could never leave show business. It's the glamour. I will never forget. I always remember that vision of you just scraping this gross meat off this plate. But you're right. You know what? The harder you work with people, you know.
Yeah. I mean, because the other thing, it was like, besides like that crazy blowing up of balloons in the hundreds of balloons every night and helium in the back and tying them, like, but also do you remember, like, we'd have to hunt for silverware and cutlery?
Oh yes.
If we were sold out because it was a motel, right? It was like, so sometimes we had to go all the way up to these banquet rooms and steal
the silverware.
Cutlery. Like people didn't want to give it to you. It's it was crazy.
Or what's his name?
Tony
the cook would have left, and you just got 10 people came in, right? And Ma would be outside screaming at him,
pulling him out of his
car to get him back in the kitchen, right? Or when one night the whole like Caesar salad fell right into the drain, and he was just like, well, that's
you didn't see this.
You didn't see this. This is all we got. You know.
Well, he hadn't made it up. That was the lettuce. He said, "There's no more." So
we don't have any more lettuce.
We tell everybody there, all the actors,
because we love that Caesar salad.
Yeah. Don't eat that Caesar salad tonight.
Yeah, because we all ate that.
You had the roll-out salad bar, right? Like we initially did.
Yeah, because we had that in the 40s. I think the 90s, the 20s, and the 40s all had the roll-out salad bar that would the parquet floor and make it nice and slippery for when you're about to dance on it. Well, yeah, but that that could be very. You're right, Kathy. Like that whole thing would be very stressful because not only, I mean, because you had somebody like Ma Potter who was on your back. You know, she could be a really tough cookie until you got to know her, and then or you got to basically she would be like, earn my respect.
Yeah, you got to earn your stripes.
Earn your stripes. So she would. I remember coming in feeling pretty intimidated.
Yes, I remember.
Like, am I going to be able to, do this and, be okay? Because she would, she'd yell at you. She'd be like telling you off and telling you where to go. You're late, and
I mean, I'm sure she wasn't used to showbiz type. She was used to being a manager of a restaurant, so
she was probably good. And she was also, what's the word? She was a mentor to, I think, everybody about your work ethic, your work ethic, showing up on time. Like,
you're right.
She ended up liking working with the actor waiters more than the actual real waiters in other parts of the hotel by the end of it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, she just fell in love with all the actors. It's like she left us, was it around the time of Annie Get Your Gun? It was really not quite the same after she left.
Yeah. And I remember what I always loved was when she and Frank would dance.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, the 40s show, they would get up at the end. And they would, every once in a while, they'd be like, they would do like a swing dance or something like that. And I mean, what's not to love? I mean, literally Kevin would come up to her and flip her. Like he did, us. Like she'd be like, Kevin, and you'd be like, flip her around. I mean, I'm saying, I think there was such a real appreciation.
She always stood up for the waiters, though.
Yeah.
The actors who were waiting, because especially there can be mistakes
Yeah.
comp
Tip.
checks where we drank a little bit too much.
Oh,
And
well.
there just could be, there could be, I think, was it Barbara Pierce? One night she got this huge tip.
I did.
You got the tip?
I got, it was
It was like $100.
no, yes, it was me. It was New Year's Eve.
It was huge. It was like above.
I got
above.
$100, okay? A tip. I know I had it. And I couldn't find it anywhere.
Oh
I
no.
couldn't find it. And I calculated out, I knew I had it. I couldn't find it anywhere. I looked through all the envelopes. I had people were looking all over the place, and Ma was looking for it and everything. And I was like, well, there goes my big, because that was the night you made all your
Right.
money, right? That was a really good night, right? And this is Christmas time and all this, right? And she was like, no, it's gone. So I got zero that night. Zero.
No.
I walked away. The next day or when we came back, she was like, I found she had a crisp $100 bill, because I know I had I remember having $400 bills. Like I remember having, and she had a nice crisp $100 bill. She said, I found your money. And she said it was inside the envelope. They had stuck together. The bills had stuck together. So it wasn't like whatever.
Wow.
But I have a feeling, only years later, I have a feeling she actually put the money in there for me.
It would be
Yeah.
something she would have done. Yeah.
Right. And I was like so happy. And like, I was beside myself.
But that's not the story I was thinking of.
Oh, because
Barbara Pierce
has the story of the guy who was cheating on his wife.
She just said, don't spend this money because there's a good chance it was a mistake.
Oh.
And sure enough, a day or two later, the customer called back and said they accidentally
over tipped.
They meant to give like a 10 and they gave 100.
Oh,
it was
wow.
cash. It was a cash.
Yeah. It was a one-time, like $100 tip,
yes,
like that. Yeah.
yes.
No, mine was a total.
Yeah,
Total.
Yours was
total.
in your total.
So we called.
Somebody forgot their credit card.
It was, yes, if somebody forgot their credit card. So we called the house.
Well, we went to Ma. She looked up the
number or whatever. Oh yeah, the reservation.
To get the number.
Right. So she calls.
Because she matched it to the name.
She calls the house. She said, hello, Mrs. Smith. You were just here with your husband. Whatever. Just here with your husband at the dinner theater, and he left his card. And she was like, I was not at any dinner theater.
Oh.
Yeah, I can remember after she left, like first this guy came in who'd been to whatever they call that, hospitality school.
Oh, yes.
And he was accusing, and I said, he said, oh no, they're bringing in the discount coupons out of the newspaper.
Oh.
And they're pocketing the money.
The actors are.
Yeah, the actors. And I said, first of all, what proof do you have of this? Secondly, then don't put those ads in the paper if you think that's going on. I was so upset with this guy. I went right up to Mealy to defend all the performers because I knew they weren't doing that.
Yes.
And thinking, God, there's a lot of ways to rob this place blind.
And we did.
This isn't what anyone's used.
I mean, there was the toilet paper. There was going shopping in the refrigerator. There was the booze. I mean, come on. Like, really?
Please.
We didn't need to be clipping coupons.
Yeah.
Like, really? That's like a sure way of getting caught,
And then that guy left. I forget his name. He didn't last. He was something else. And then they made Marilyn, the bartender, the manager of the room.
What show was that? Because I sort of have a vague remembrance.
You probably because people would get pulled in to serve sometimes, but that was like Kiss Me Kate. Maybe?
By Kiss Me Kate.
Oh, see, I was gone by. I was in New York by 84, the fall of 84.
Yeah, you didn't do guys.
What's that?
You didn't do Guys and Dolls.
No, I did.
Or Pajama Game or anything.
I only did I did all three of the reviews, but I only did the Gypsy.
Yeah.
Because then I did a string of shows in Sudbury, and then I went to New York. So I didn't even get to see those shows. I saw Guys and Dolls. It was great.
I did the last review show, the last Folly show, which was the 40s, and all the book shows.
Yeah.
Under Frank, except for the very last one, which was Oklahoma, and I had left by then.
Were you in Oklahoma, Gerry?
No.
No, you were gone too. Mary Ann sent me some photographs of it. She and she and Robin Blake look perfect as Curly and Lori.
Was in it.
Dory Elliott played Ado Annie, I think.
Because Marianne, there's a famous story of Marianne.
Yeah, that you made the announcement. Would you mind? And we'll call her Mrs. Appleby.
Paul was shooting Anna Green Gables.
Right, yeah. She told the
and
whole
there was
story.
a tornado.
Yeah.
But then
Like, talk about the
Frank-
show must go
Frank
on.
went on for Teresa as Bianca.
Bianca
2 months in a row.
I think they gave everybody like a bottle of wine or something.
2 nights in a row. And that's the famous. So first he said, okay, Teresa had measles, something. She came up with measles.
She had measles.
Okay. So he's like, I'm gonna go on as in my what I'm wearing, and I'm gonna carry a script or whatever, like sort of thing. He knew the show inside out, right? But so to look like really he was
What he was wearing looked exactly like Robin's costume in the show. So they look like twins.
So they were playing, a girlfriend and boyfriend lovers, right? So they're like, this looks really.
It was
fun.
very progressive.
It was very progressive, but very fun. So we're like, Frank, we think, and Frank was sort of catching on too, right? So he's like, I think I need to put some costumes on. So every time he went out, he had more and more costume pieces.
He'd add things.
He'd add things, like he'd add a shawl. And I think finally he had Mary's old curly wig on from when she was Baby June. Okay, he ended up with that because what did we have in the what wigs do we have? So by the time because I was playing Kate, by the time I got to sing, I am ashamed that women are so simple, right? I mean, oh my God, I was crying because I'm singing to Bianca, right? And he's like looking at me like he's got the shawl on.
Oh
and he's
my
doing
God.
like this kind of thing, okay? Oh my God. So I was just holding it together. And they, and then we're almost at the finale. And Petruchio, who was Greg Campbell goes, to Kate, there's a wench. So he says to me, and I'm like,
you point to Frank.
So I went, no. And I point to Frank. I go, now there's a wench.
The audience just exploded. They thought it was hilarious.
How could you not look at this guy?
Yeah.
Oh my God. And who was hilarious in it was Tareen. And that other guy,
Mark Tureen and Robert Kennedy.
They played the tough dudes.
Mark Tureen is a Moho here. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they did.
Brush Up with Shakespeare.
Oh my God, they were so funny. I mean,
that is such a great number.
It's such a great number. They always did such a great job.
Yeah, I taught him how to tap dance.
Really?
Taught Mark Tureen how to tap dance.
Okay.
Like if you were going to say something to Frank, what would you say?
Thanks for bringing everybody together and doing these crazy things. And we used to do other gigs with him sometimes too. I don't know. I remember going off site with him to like a golf club, and we do excerpts from the show of the 40s, and like there'd be other things he would book us on and do. And I also remember everybody piling into that station wagon with the fake plants in the window. And and like you said, we partied. There were so many parties we went to.
And we always wanted to be together. Yeah.
Yeah. All the same people that were working together. I remember doing the shows, and when I wasn't doing the show, it seemed like I was at a party.
Yes. And I always feel like I remember it as like a really happy time. That's what I remember.
I do. I do.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate. Many times I was miserable because I thought I needed to be in Stratford. What was I doing in this basement? With the Mickey Mouse hands, really, the striped shirt and the stinky clothes, and like really, my gifts were being. So there were many times I felt like my career was not going, like here I was, but another year here at the Moho, right? Like what the hell am I doing? But with all of that said, before, because we talked before about all the things that happened. Frank gave me opportunities to direct, to assistant direct, to choreograph, to put pieces together, so he gave me so many opportunities On top of which, opportunities to do some roles I probably would never have done and never done at that point. And I think that was the incredible gift, and the gift of sort of confidence, like I believe in you, and also he would give me some tough notes sometimes. He'd be like, that don't do that, or I wouldn't be doing it that way. He also, basically opened this, it's not like today where you can go on like up any lyrics you want. He went and he would take me to the CBC library, and he let me get all the music. Like, he'd say, okay, go in here. I don't know how he got access, but he had access to the CBC library. He'd be like, you can go and find your music and pull music and get it and all that stuff. Like these were things he was doing to support me as an artist, as a young person coming to Toronto. And I'm sure he did that for lots of us, but so it was things like that he was always like just such a loving guy that way. Exactly. And he frustrated the shit out of me because I don't, he was not a great director. He was not a great choreographer, but he knew it. And he would be like, well, I'm all you got. So, he'd be like, oh, the muses have left me. The muses have left me. He'd say that all the time. Be like, Frank, come on. But he also brought in a lot of people to help him out. He was very, very generous in that way, super generous, in so many friggin' ways that.
Also, that place he had on Seton, remember?
Yeah.
And any actor who was downtown, because not everybody lived downtown. People lived in the beaches. They lived in Hyde Park. It's like if they needed somewhere to stop between auditions or whatever, he would leave that key.
You left that key. You pulled it through the string.
People used
Talk
to
about generous. Yeah.
Incredibly generous.
Yeah.
I know.
Incredibly generous.
Yeah. It was pretty exciting for me because I kind of had him. I had a big crush on him, and I had him on a bit of a pedestal, but because he really, when he was up on stage, he did have that thing. But I got to do a lot of shows with him afterwards, like out at Rainbow and at the Limelight and Sudbury. And it was really fun to work with him in that way too,
Yeah. Yeah. I think he was a real mensch. He was, you know what I'm saying? So when you did work with him, like, cause I worked with him like at Grand Bend and a few other spots, he was just like, he was always willing to put everything in perspective. You know what I'm saying? Like come off your high horse, you know what I'm saying? Like, he was always ready to be like, listen, put this in perspective in your whole life, enjoy what you have right now,
Exactly.
A big testament to that was when he had his big 60th birthday. It was 60, right? His 60th birthday bash. You couldn't go because you were doing a show somewhere, but I flew in from LA, and Kimberly was there. You were there, weren't you?
Yep, that's what that picture I posted on Facebook is of that night. Yeah.
Like that was an incredible, and so many people.
Well, they had to rent that whole big building that the talent house used to rent. It was packed with it's like he had so many lifetimes too. Like he had connections to so many different theaters and
he did all kinds of stuff and all kinds of people, and he right back, because he goes right back to Pig and Whistle.
Exactly.
Which I remember watching because my parents loved that show. And then to think, oh my God, I had to tell my parents, this guy I'm working with is a dancer on Pig and Whistle, because it was the Roland and Romaine dancers on there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. My God.
And the other thing too, I remember I tell everybody, like, Frank was not a big guy, okay?
No.
5'5" in heels. But I would tell people, this guy could lift anyone.
Yes.
Could lift anyone, and could also teach you how to lift. Yeah. How to be lifted and how to lift. Like, I swear he could lift anybody, that guy.
Yeah, and he knew how to take this, had all that technique and could still sell. Sometimes people can sell, but they got nothing to sell. And some people have lots of technique, but
and half the time, sometimes he would do it when he was half drunk. He still had it. He would,
Well, it was a type of showmanship, like when you're down here in the States, like that's like a Vegas showmanship. You know what I mean? You
it was even better than
it's
that.
It's a dying art, really.
But it was better than that. So because the guy, I think he loved performing. So sometimes you can smell like they're just kind of putting on the pace. He was out there. He enjoyed everyone. He enjoyed, the comments from the audience. Like he didn't get. I'm sure he got weary and tired at some point because he would have his wine spritzers and I'm sure there's at some point like he probably thought himself too, like what am I doing here? Like I'm 40 plus years old and I'm still, but I did not feel he ever faked it.